And now, here's Dr. Mike.
Hello, friends. It's Monday, and that means it's time for the live show. Thanks for joining me today. I am welcoming back my good friend, John Haller. John, thank you for joining me today.
Good to be back with you, Mike.
Yeah, we haven't chatted in a while. I think the last time we chatted, you actually were up here in my neck of the woods, and you and Pam and Kathy and I went out and had a nice meal together and had a nice.
Well, first we tried to find a restaurant that would take us with no mask on, as I recall, and then the one we wanted to go to just happened to be closed, I think. And
yeah. Oh, yes, you're right. I forgot all about that. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And
so, I remember where I eat and where I don't eat usually. So
yeah, for sure. So it's been a while since we've had an opportunity to chat live online. I guess we correspond back and forth all the time. But so anyway, lots of things to talk about, and of course the big, the gorilla, 800-pound gorilla in the room is Ukraine, Russia. So let's just start there, John, for sake of a launching point. We chatted before we went on the air, and I think this will resonate with folks. There is so much misinformation and propaganda out there concerning this conflict that it's wow. I'm just going to toss you and let you comment.
Well, I think I joked before we started the air that it was just so wonderful to see the complete unity in the body of Christ about what was going on in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And, that it's kind of interesting. The church, the 7 churches of Revelation, which may or may not represent time periods in history, but if they do, the last church before the Lord returns would be the Laodicean church, which really, when you break down Laodicea, people's opinions, it is the church of people's opinions. I mean, and social media has just exacerbated that. So, no matter what I say, I get a bunch of emails like, well, you need to look at this, you need to look at this, you need to look at this. Or people send me just tons of information asking me, I do these prophecy updates each week, asking me like, so what's true? What can I believe and what I can't believe? And so I think we can be nuanced to know that there's a lot of bad people running a lot of countries in the world. There's not too many good ones at this point. Our own government is corrupt. I mean, the regime, I call it the Biden administration, for obvious reasons, is very corrupt. The president is corrupt. His family is corrupt, and have received millions of dollars from companies in Ukraine and in China. So there's a lot more behind than what's in the headlines. And then, so it's very difficult to understand. So I think we can be nuanced to understand that Putin is himself a bad guy. I've been getting emails all day where, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he has $1 billion in his bank account. And I'm like, well, okay, Putin has 100 billion. So what, so we start launching missiles into there, and so I think, I'm not sure what it is. I think everybody wants a narrative that they're comfortable with, that they can get, if they can sort of get one side to be okay in this whole thing, then they're comfortable with that. So I think, everybody should go home and leave everybody else alone. And I think we've provoked Putin. I think he has a legitimate beef about some things. I don't know if he's gone about it the right way. And it's hard to tell how well it's going for him. I do think, everybody was telling me this is going to be over in 72 hours, and that's wrong now by about 2 weeks since that 72-hour period expired. And I don't think it's going well for him. I think ultimately he will prevail, but then the question is, what does he get out of it in the end? But I think for students of the Bible, the most important thing is how does this relate to Bible prophecy is what the question that I get. And the answer is, I don't know. as time has gone on in my views of how things play out in the end times, I've become probably less dogmatic as to timing issues. I always quote every week. I start off my thing. I have sort of a grid that I've developed to watch news and events happen. So I take what I know is going to happen in the Bible, which is not super specific in a lot of cases. These prophecies don't come with timestamps necessarily. Mm-hmm. So I'm open to a lot of reasonable views. And one of those would be this Ezekiel 38 and 39 thing, the Gog-Magog war. So now the question becomes, where is that a war that happens before the millennium? We know there's one after the millennium. At the end of the millennium, there's a Gog-Magog war that's talked about in Revelation chapter 20, but there's not a lot of detail. So some people say, well, Ezekiel 38 talks about Gog-Magog, therefore it has to be after the millennium. And there's a lot of good people, Chris White and other people who say that it's at the end of the millennium. But then there are some details in there about burning weapons and the burial of Gog. And some people think that Gog is the Antichrist. But then I see in the Antichrist in Revelation, it says he and the false prophet are thrown together alive into the lake of fire, and there's no burial. And then if you're getting into the get into the millennium, why are they burning weapons in the millennium? I can see them, or after the millennium, right. At the end, when you're getting into the internal state, I can see the burning of weapons in the millennium. There's no details as to exactly what we're going to be doing during the millennium. Do we need power sources? Do we need people working and that type of thing? We know there's, I think Ezekiel 40 through 48 talks about an earthly temple that will be there, I think, as a memorial for things that had happened in the past. And so there's going to be people that are going to be working in the temple. I mean, it's, so I don't think there's Jesus comes down and waves a magic wand and says, hey, just, go play golf or something like that, which would be fine with me, by the way. But we don't know those details. So, I personally believe there's a Gog-Magog that happens before the millennium. So where is it? Is it just before Armageddon? Is it part of Armageddon? And then who does it involve? So, we know there's this Gog of Magog, Rosh, Meshach, Tubal, Rosh. This description of people groups that come out of the table. A lot come out of the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10, the sons of Japheth. And so I think you can make a case that Magog is the area around eastern Turkey up to like Georgia, which is when you layer that on top of current events, it's interesting that is where the family of the president of Turkey is from, Erdogan. Mm-hmm. And so, this Erdogan guy is a real interesting character in the world today, and he is an Islamist. But now he's reaching out to Israel because he's kind of in a pickle and he needs their help. And there's some things he wants from them for his economy and that type of thing. And he seems to get away with everything. That's the other thing that kind of amazes me about him. Then so that's one view. Another view would be sort of more of a spiritual view of Magog. It comes from the heights of the north, sort of that's where trouble came from. That's where the Hebrews, I think this is a view that Michael Heiser might hold to or teach, and others that have researched it. I think Derek Gilbert, kind of holds to this view as well. And that, it really, if it came from any place physical, it would be right there along the northern border of Syria. And then there are people who go into maps and some other historical documents that are relatively contemporary with the time of Ezekiel, like the Book of Jubilees, and I think it's chapters 22 through 25, that really describes the river that divides Kiev, that comes down through the middle of Ukraine. and that this in that area all the way over to Korea. Somebody sent me a map that said that the Korea area was originally known as Gog Korea, Gog, like in Gog. And there's books that have been written. I think, I don't remember who wrote it, to be honest with you. Babylon Rising referred to the Great Wall of China as the ramparts of Magog. And the people that lived there were not nice people. I mean, they came across the world and then eventually morphed into the Mongol Empire, and that probably is the largest land-based empire in terms of square miles in the history of mankind. So I just sort of put these into baskets of probability. So when I put my grid together, I have first of all, I have the acceleration thing. Things are going to be happening more quickly, and I think if you look at my inbox, I'm sure your inbox is the same way. It's just filled with information, and everybody's putting up. I mean, I get sent, it's way over 100 videos a week. Well, first of all, I don't have time to watch all of them, let alone do my own video. And I want to learn, and I don't want to completely be dismissive of people, but sometimes you just have to kind of, what do you call it? Dig out the bad stuff. So there's an acceleration. Things are going to be happening quickly. There's going to be a convergence. All the different lines of Bible prophecy are going to happen. You're going to see the beginnings, the building up of this beast system, people pushing for a world empire, the nations aligning. Then you have a logistics issue. So I look at, so people see Russia and Syria. They see Iran and Syria. They see missiles being launched by Iran. They see Iran saying what they say about Israel. And there's a tendency, too, to make everything imminent in Bible prophecy, like it's going to happen tomorrow, and you get this sort of alarmist thing. And I I try to avoid that because I think it's not helpful to the overall message that we're trying to convey. So, and then it also says in Ezekiel 38:39, there'll be a great company and a mighty army. Well, I don't think 50,000 Hezbollah guys in southern Lebanon and Syria are a great company and a mighty army. But then, maybe it's a technology thing. I mean, the world technology is changing. I mean, the Ukrainian army seems to be doing pretty good with Javelin missiles and some drones from Turkey that a big army like Russia is having trouble with. And you look at the security guys and they all say this drone technology is a real game changer. And it allows countries like Iran to punch way above their weight class. Mm-hmm. And it's not like Russia's the richest, most powerful nation on the earth. They're, as some people say, they're a gas station with a country on top of it. And they haven't really built up in industrial base to go with what they have. Like we do the technology thing and we build that up and we do this, so we're a little bit broader, but Russia's economy is about the same. It's a little bit more than Spain's. I think if you combine the GDP of Ohio and Florida together, you would equal the GDP of Russia.
Wow.
But they put a lot of it into the military, so they're powerful. They have a lot, but it's not going well with them. And so these Javelin missiles and some drones are sort of, I think they're sort of showing that tank warfare is maybe a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then everybody says, well, we have to do ships, so China's building up their ships. Our Navy has declined, not just in number of ships, but in ideology and the way they're, this woke military thing. I'm sure that strikes fear into the heart of Vladimir Putin. When they're having transgender parties at military bases and everything. But, the Navy could be neutralized by hypersonic missiles, which one of those can take out a ship. And there's absolutely no defense to those. and even air missile defense systems are somewhat suspect in this day and age. So there was a study by the American Physics or Physical Society, a group of physics who analyzed weapon systems and said that even with the best of the United States being ready for 4 Korean missiles would overwhelm the system and could not defend against them. So that's kind of scary. But the hypersonic missiles, which go anywhere from 5 to 8 to 12 times the speed of sound, you're not going to move a ship out of the way of one of those things, and it can take out an aircraft carrier. So is the Navy the way the thing's going to go? So, and then I think the other thing I use in my grid is understanding that as we get closer to the end, Daniel 11 and 12 talk about that there will be wise people who will be going back and forth through the scriptures, and they will understand and instruct many. Yes. So I think that that's maybe where we should be focused on, and we'll be sure when it all works out, when it all happens the way that it was supposed to work out. And I think I just don't like the side of the infighting over, well, my timing is better than your timing. And I think there's needs to be some humility here, because listen, Mike, you and I, we've talked about this, and we've known each other for almost 20 years now. 20 years ago, if we had done this interview, we wouldn't be talking about any of this stuff that's going on right now. And we could talk over the last 20 years of things that have happened that none of us really saw coming. So I think we need to be a little bit humble about these things. We need to just, not be so certain on some things that this is the way it's going to work out. So let's talk about it. Let's debate it. Let's argue. I'm a lawyer. I love to argue. Sometimes I might even do it for free. Don't tell my clients. Well, I'm sort of near the end of my career here, but it's but I mean, that first conference I met you at that you did with Chuck Missler and Dave Hunt. I mean, I just wonder what they would be saying if they were sitting here today in a round table with us. I think they would be. Those guys knew a lot. Mm-hmm. They were pretty sharp. Yeah. And they would be, I think they would say, I didn't see this one coming. Yeah. I never thought I would see this. So you layer on top of that the transhumanism thing, technocracy, artificial intelligence, control. I think that's where, so I don't know who's right or wrong in Ukraine. Yeah. Like I said, I think we provoke Putin, but, then people come in and they say, well, there's biolabs. There's 25 biolabs that we've helped fund in Ukraine. I'm like, well, okay, but we have biolabs all over the United States. Mm-hmm. And for example, so I don't know if they're all level 4 bioweapons labs. I don't think they are. But they do have things there. But I was reading an article in the New York Times yesterday. There's an outbreak of some microbe out in South Dakota that's killing the bison. Oh. So, and they're having trouble treating it. And they're just, they had in one area, they had 29 calves whose mothers had died. And the bison are walking around the plains coughing and hacking. And if you've ever been close to a bison, I was just near some in Yellowstone in South Dakota last year. When they breathe, they make a lot of noise, let alone when they're coughing and hacking. Yes. And they don't know what to do. Well, what they do is they isolate the pathogen. They've isolated the pathogen, and they will store that in facilities so that when a bison gets sick, they'll run, blood test or whatever. So they need a control sample. And that's what it's in a lot of these biolabs, but it is dangerous. You don't want it out there. Right. And I guess my reaction was they're not that big of facilities. So why don't the Russians just send their special forces in and take them out? If that's the big concern. But again, I think it comes into the propaganda thing. And I'm not saying everything we've done is right. And I'm not saying that the biolabs that our government and our tax dollars have funded are good. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is we need to drill down into the details. So from a Bible prophecy standpoint, what I've seen here over the last month that concerns me the most, as a person who lives in a real world and in which Jesus is still not returned, so I got to live in this world, is the all of this stuff with the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset and the control of the financial system. So yesterday I shared somebody at church had given me the online banking instructions or agreement that they had with their bank. And it's not a big bank. So this, but the bank does online banking, and it says, if we reserve the right to refuse to make payments if it involves casino gambling, pharmaceuticals, tobacco products. And then it said like hate, bigotry, and other things. Well, what are those things? And where they're going with this. So we see all of these people pretty much on the conservative Christian side of things that are getting debanked. We saw this happen up on a pretty epic scale up in Canada with this little, Justin Trudeau, who through his finance minister, deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, if there's anybody who's been misnamed, it's her, Freeland, who put in these draconian controls, grabbing cryptocurrency, bank accounts, and everything of people who'd only given like maybe $25 to the truckers. So, we had this whole thing about COVID for the last couple of years, which has completely disrupted society. There's just, even today, I go downtown Columbus on the few occasions I have to go to the office. But, I was going down there. I work in a 40-story building, and there are maybe 30 cars in the parking garage. And for a 40-story building, the headquarters of a bank, a bunch of big law firms, accounting firms, and consultants, and there's nobody there. And this went on for months and months. And then, of course, we had all the protests, and then the whole square. My office looks straight down on the center of the Capitol building. I mean, I could dive right into the middle of the dome if I could jump far enough. But everything's boarded up. The whole square for a block or two in each direction, all the main first two levels are all boarded up windows. And it's just this kind of strange dystopian society that we live in. And we're all, we got to get the treatment for Charlie. I call it Charlie Vector 019er. That's my kind of code word, so I can get around the sensors that seem to follow me around. And we have all that, and then it was like 3 weeks ago. I photoshopped a milk carton with Tony Fauci's picture on it for my prophecy update a couple weeks ago. It's like, where's Tony?
Yeah.
I mean, he's like gone.
Yeah.
And these guys are heading for the hills, and it's like it all stopped at the same time. But then, so what they did was they took the template that they used for the truckers in Canada, and now our government and Western governments are using against an entire country. They're debanking and taking out of the financial system. Yeah. And I don't like Putin. Okay. I think he's a bad guy, but they're crushing a whole country of people with this financial thing. And boy, what do you think they're going to do? I mean, this is just like a preview of what's coming. And so, what do you do? I mean, what do they? So some people say, well, we'll go to a Christian-oriented credit union for our banking. Okay, but what happens when they're removed from the payment system? I mean, PayPal takes people out all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
And they have this GoFundMe. They just say initially they said, well, we're just going to keep all the money and give it to whoever we think we should give it to. and they backed off of it. So then everybody went over to Give, Send, Go, but then Give, Send, Go, they were coming after them. And so this has long been a concern of mine as a lawyer. I mean, I've seen people who have been caught up in this government dragnet of crushing them financially before they even file charges against them or anything. It's just like, well, you've got the fruits of a crime, but good luck getting your money. Good luck, even if you win, you ever getting your money back. And it's like, this is American government doing this to people, and it just shouldn't happen. It's unconstitutional. It's against the law, and it's scary. It's very scary. Yeah, because it's hard to live in this day and age. So as I said in my update yesterday, so now they have this system at this little bank on online banking where they're gonna judge whether what your financial transactions are worthy of them handling. And where does it start? So where this is the Chinese social credit system. Yeah. That's been imported into our financial system without a vote or anything like that. So through organizations like the World Economic Forum and others, they've adopted this thing called ESG. I don't know if you've heard of it. ESG, environment, social, and governance. And then they do this, and every law firm in the world now has a Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI. So all this stuff is done. And then I've seen, I think Glenn Beck has shared them, people who have a stock trading account or something at Merrill Lynch, they get their statement, and on their statement is this ESG score. Like they're evaluating how you're doing with regard to your investments. Wow. And then I've seen the videos of people in China. I've been using them for a couple years. I did a talk up in Canada last year, virtually, of course, because you can't go across the border. Because you're the equivalent of a leper, I guess. You're unclean because you may not have had the sufficient treatments on Charlie Vector 019, or even if you've had it and recovered, it doesn't make any difference, which is kind of odd. But I called my talk "Deplatforming Humanity." The great setup of the Great Reset, or something like that. And so I used a video from China where these guys, they go to a kiosk to buy a high-speed train ticket or an airline ticket, and it won't let them buy it. And so where does it start? I mean, is it like, hey, John Haller, it looks like you've been eating too many fries. So your credit card, you're trying to buy fries at the restaurant, your credit card is declined because we think you need a little bit of help on your health part, your health score. So you have the rolling out of these vaccine passports, and you're not talking about it, but now just go look up smart health cards. They're all over the place. There's 100 health systems using them now, 30 states, including red states in the United States. And so this is the importation of this social credit system that it's hard enough to maintain your credit score, your financial credit score, your FICO score, whatever it is, credit rating. And, I was within, actually, at one point in my life, got up to like 3 points short of perfect on their scale. And so I paid off a credit card, and my credit score went down, which didn't make any sense to me. So it, and if you can't figure out the easy financial side of this thing, then how are you ever going to know where you stand on the social credit score? Except I know I'm pretty much going to be pretty low on the scale. Yeah. And then you're taken out of the financial system. And then all of a sudden this starts to sound very much like what will happen with the mark of the beast when you'll be forbidden to buy or sell.
Yeah.
So that the vaccine passports they don't talk about, but now it's called smart health cards. And just go Google it. I talked about it Sunday, and you can find them all over the internet. And a lot of it, it's a somebody said, well, is it your vaccine identification or is it a real identification? And the answer is it's both.
Yeah.
And so Naomi Wolf has done some great work on this. So it's just, so it's a stressful time to be alive. So, So I sent you an article earlier. I don't know that we need to spend much time talking about it. Trying to remember.
Well, I think it's a good example, John. Kathy, if you could pull up the article from the U.S.-China Perception Monitor, and we'll spend a few months. Yes, thank you, dear.
Oops, that's the wrong one.
So is this the right one, John?
Yeah. This is the one. It's by a Chinese social policy. He's got some title with about 80 words in it.
Yeah.
And this is a translation, so it's a little rough in parts, but it's called "Possible Outcomes of the Russia-Ukrainian War and China's Choice." So what we've seen is this alignment in this thing geopolitically, where China and Russia have kind of joined together.
Mm-hmm.
They had in fact, there was a article in the Financial Times of London on January 22nd or 24th, about 6 weeks, almost 2 months ago. And it said that, China and Russia are getting together to form a new world order. This is in the lead up to the Ukrainian war. This is before. Now, you're sort of seeing some cracks, I think, in the relationship between China and Russia. And the word today is, and again, you don't know if this is propaganda or not. They've lost a lot of tanks and that type of thing. And so they're going to China asking them for equipment. They're bringing in Chechen militias after they crushed a revolt in Chechnya back in the mid 2000s. And remember that where the Islamic jihadists took over that school, and there were 300 or 350 children and teachers killed.
Yes.
And so Putin did go in and crush that. And the guy who was leading one of the rebellious militias actually defected to Russia. Now he died, but his son has taken over. But I had a video of them on a plane on their way to Ukraine yesterday. And there's reports that they're bringing in mercenaries from Syria and maybe Libya to fight. And this is what's happening is everybody outsources everything these days. But there's also reports that our own intelligence agencies and whatever are recruiting fighters for Ukraine from within Syria. So now you're having Syria has become the template for what's going on in Ukraine. And Russia's there. And I would encourage you to go watch my update yesterday or look it up. Just look up drone footage, Syria destruction on YouTube. And what's happened is this massive destruction that's been done by Syria with their partner Russia. They've destroyed whole cities where they have essentially I'm pretty sure, I don't have a demographic map, but pretty sure they were Sunni areas because Iran is in partnership with Russia there. And they're trying to make their influence all the way across to the Mediterranean. So they have militias there. The U.S. has militias we support there. Russia has them to support. But they just barrel bombed whole city blocks. Go look at the pictures. And I will say that if this thing in Ukraine does not wind down pretty quickly, these Ukrainian cities are going to look like that. Because that's what happened in Syria, where Russia was involved, and I think that's what's going to happen in Ukraine.
Yeah, and that's one of the arguments or one of the possible outcomes that this Hugh Wee, the author of this article, "Possible Outcomes of the Russo-Ukrainian War with China's Choice," he's the Public Policy Research Center Yeah, you're right, John. Wow, what a title.
Yeah.
Vice Chairman of the Public Policy Research Center of the Counselor's Office of the State Council, the Chairman of the Shanghai Public Policy Research Association, the Chairman of the Academic Committee of the Chebar Institute, Professor, Doctoral Supervisor, so on and on and on. But one of the points as I was looking through this today after you sent it, one of the points that he makes is that China needs to remain neutral or even start distancing itself from Putin and Russia, because the analysis that he's giving is that this isn't going well for Putin, and it's the longer it drags out, the worse it's going to be, and there's going to be a buildup of anti-Russian sentiment globally. And I was quite surprised at this, but then I thought, well, it is coming from China, so
Well, and this is where you got to kind of play like, okay, is somebody pulling the wool over my eyes type thing with all the I've never seen propaganda like this from everybody.
Yeah.
And so it was published. These things don't get published without the approval of the powers that be. For example, in Russian TV last week, there were a couple of generals that were on Russian TV talking about, we really shouldn't have done this. Now, do you think that happened without Putin's approval? And then what was it trying to do? Well, maybe it's trying to make him look sympathetic. And then this one here is maybe they're trying to have cover. Listen, you can't trust China.
That's right.
Okay. You just can't. It's a massive criminal enterprise that just wants to crush people. They do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so maybe the Chinese put it out so that it softens the blow. So like, oh, China's on our side. We're all against Russia now, and kumbaya, let's work with Russia. So if you're trying to use this metaphor when you're talking about China, but if you're reading the tea leaves, maybe this is a puff piece to kind of get the West to, it's sort of like the magic act, where he's doing all this stuff over here with this hand, and then this hand over here, you're not paying attention to, where he's doing all the other stuff. So I don't know. It's a very interesting article. I do think that the optics today, when you see these cities just flattened, or maybe we'll see these cities flattened like they have been in Syria, is going to be problematic. And so Russia, not Russia, but Europe, which has already absorbed millions of refugees coming out of the Middle East and Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq over the past 5 or 6 years. I was looking at there's a website that has the flow of refugees on it. I think it's called Lucify. I know it's kind of a weird word, lucify.com.
Yeah.
And it has this great, but it just shows like between 2012 and 2018, the flow of refugees from Africa, the Middle East, and Russia into Europe, the positive inflow. And it's shocking to watch it. But now, you're talking, we're already in 2 weeks, we're up to 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees. And how many more are there going to be as we move down the road a little bit? That's, I mean, and
very good question.
And people in the United States are asking, well, wait a minute, we're concerned about the Ukrainian Russia border. What about our border? And there's stuff going on, within our hemisphere that's just shocking. Somebody sent me an article today. I was reading about it, about these, and it's a person you would know. She has a lot of credibility in my book, about these burn pits that they're finding, where there's like in one area of Mexico, there's 100,000 people missing. And now they're finding these burn pits with just body parts in them.
Wow.
And the 100,000 people in this one province are missing. And so there's a level of cruelty and that type of thing that goes on in this world. I mean, our late friend, Russ Dizdar, talked a lot about this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard to wrap your head around it, that, this
really
is America. And then this stuff going on the border and these lunatics in Washington just sort of sweep it under the carpet. I call the press secretary. If you ever seen a picture of her and Mark Zuckerberg, they look like twins.
Yes.
So I call her Cruella von Zuckerberger. Is my name for her. And they just lie all the time. It's
constantly.
It's
John, we've got a lot of
got
a lot of people. That's okay. We got a lot of people in the chat across platforms. They're asking or they're making an observation that they think we're going to get pulled into this at some point somehow. And I saw this article today, Kathy. If you want to post that one I just sent you, and we'll just discuss this briefly. Over at Yahoo News, GOP senators demand that U.S. help transfer fighter jets to Ukraine. So,
everybody has their own lunatics, I guess, because this just doesn't make any sense. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I believe it's a good idea when one of them climbs in the back seat of the fighter jet that goes in. But this would be an escalation, and it could lead. It could lead to World War III. I mean, remember, it was the assassination of the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Sarajevo that ticked off World War I. And millions of people died. And then, 25 years later, 20 years later, there was another war in Europe in which, 40, 50, 60 million people worldwide died.
Mm-hmm.
We get upset at the pandemic, which has supposedly taken, 4, 6, 8 million, depending on how you massage the numbers. But let's just assume that they're accurate. You're talking 5 to 15 times the number in World War II. I don't know that we're going to transfer those jets. I mean, Poland was very clever. They said, we're not going to transfer them, but
that's right.
We'll take them over to a U.S. base and you guys can put your markings on them and then transfer them to Ukraine.
Smart.
Now, I thought that was calling our bluff. So I don't see us the president, maybe this is the one time you can believe him. We're not going to put troops on the ground. But there does seem to be this escalation. So let's look at it, though, in terms of Bible prophecy. Let's look at it in a logistics standpoint. So let's say somebody convinces everybody that Russia is Magog that's going to lead this invasion of Israel in the end times. So this is where the logistics come in because, Russia had a couple weeks they couldn't move their tanks. They were stuck in a 40-mile long single file line, essentially, north of Kiev. It took them time. There's a logistics. You got to get fuel for tanks and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, understand that from Belarus to Kiev is probably less than 90 miles. They had to move those tanks and everything. But if you're going from southern Russia or Ukraine to the Middle East to the northern border of Israel, you're talking anywhere from 900 to 1,700 miles. So that's you don't cross that in a day. There's no magic potion. I mean, airplanes don't fly. I've been flying a lot for years. Unless you have a big tailwind, they don't fly any faster today than they did 50 years ago. It just has commercial aircraft, and that's how you would essentially the military equivalent to transport troops and everything. You don't get them there overnight. When we did the first Iraq war, that wasn't easy. That was flat desert we had to go across. Mm-hmm. And we were clearly outmanned the army, but we spent 6 months building up our forces before we invaded Iraq. So I don't know that it's going to be escalated that way. I'm surprised Putin hasn't used more air power. But maybe he doesn't have as good a military as he's led everybody to believe. That may be part of the con that he's put over on everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, military strategists will figure that out, but I don't think anybody will do anything about it. And I don't want them to. I'm not an advocate for getting involved in this, John.
No, I'm not either. I mean, look, but I think we can be nuanced to say that everybody should go home because there's people dying. There's soon going to be 4 million people. 10% of Ukraine will be not where they were living 2 or 3 weeks ago. Think of that number. That's like Columbus, Ohio. That's like 2 Columbus, Ohios. Everybody has moved in 2 weeks and not taking everything with them. And there's going to be brutality and everything. I mean, look at what Assad did with the support of the Russians, or the Russians did to prop up Assad and the Iranians and Syria. That you're talking a country that had 22 million people that now has maybe less than half of that still living in the country. And probably 65-70% of the country does not live where they lived in 2011 when that war started 11 years ago this month.
Yeah. One thing, John, that is really pressing hard on me, and this is something we touched on. I'd like to explore this a little more in the time remaining, and maybe we'll take a question or two if we have the time. The weasels among us, the wicked, evil, global, you can call them whatever you want. They go by different names. They're trying to shove this great reset and everything that entails down our throats. And I'm wondering if God isn't calling his people to a great reset of our own. And we see all of these things happening. Everybody's got an explanation or a story or a theory. My inbox is just like yours. Every day, somebody else is coming out with a new twist and a new angle. I think we can safely say this for sure, though. It's time to put aside our dogmatism on our eschatology and what we think about this or that or the other thing. How about this? How about if we have a great reset and we come together and we start telling everybody we meet that Jesus Christ is coming again? I'm not going to say soon I'm not doing that, but the point is that the ecclesia is supposed to be sharing Christ with people and leading them to saving faith in Christ. How about if we do that and we become focused on that and not so much on all these different theories coming in about where this is leading to? Because I'm going to tell you something right now. You know the same people I do, John, and they've taken out their charts and their convictions, and they're starting to use the eraser, and they're reworking some things because it's not fitting the narrative that they were so certain was going to
people who we know and love dearly.
And love.
Right. And support and do conferences with and all this other stuff. So I agree with you. The a verse that I quote from a lot is in Romans 16. Stand firm in the faith and act like men. The Christian life is not, it's tough. And you got to be bold and act like it. What's this? What's it say? Don't fear the one who can kill you, Satan. Fear the one who can destroy both body and soul.
That's right.
And so that's who we're working for. So that's the one thing. And then put on the whole armor of God. The belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness and the helmet of salvation. And then there's also this interesting part in there. And I've gotten in a lot of trouble for saying this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on it. Your feet shod with the gospel of peace. Now, listen, I want it to be clear. I believe in the gospel. Paul articulates that in 1 Corinthians 15. But as part of the armor, and I think this is true as we get closer to the Lord's return. And I don't think anybody, that's one thing we'll all agree on. This, how much longer can this go on?
Yes.
At this rate, but your feet shod with the gospel of peace. Now, as I've unpacked that, that relates back to this promise of a coming kingdom. You can see that back in Isaiah, I think it's 46, 48. And that's direct. I'm sure that's what Paul is talking about. Now, so I'm not preaching that we're going to build the kingdom. I'm preaching that there's a coming kingdom. Amen. And that we need to share the hope of that with people. So, the one line I've always said is that, you got all the rapture timing stuff, but premillennials really sort of the hill to die on in my book. Mm-hmm. And we can argue about the rapture timing and all that other stuff, and we'll know when it happens.
That's right.
But until then, and I think there's sort of pejorative things like, well, if you believe that we're going to get out of here before there's any trouble, then you're going to fall away from the faith. And I'm just telling you, I've rethought that over the last 2 weeks. And I know that that's an argument, and that's a concern, a legitimate concern. It's not denigrating people. It's scripture based and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you something. I don't care whether you're pre, mid, post, pre-wrath. It's going to be tough for everybody.
That's right.
As we get closer and closer. Yep. And so we need to come together in the unity of the Spirit and the body of Christ and be telling people that this is coming. And it's a spiritual thing, but there's also a physical aspect to it. I mean, you need to, I don't know what's going to happen. I have former clients that are farmers, and they're telling me they're paying 2.5 times today what they paid last year for fertilizer. Wow. If they can get it.
If they can get it.
And Russia and Ukraine are some of the biggest sources of fertilizer. And there's something else that, this would relate to Ohio, sort of what they're starting to call the Silicon Heartland now. Our governor, who I don't think either one of us is a fan of any longer.
Right.
But, what would be my campaign slogan is get rid of DeWine before it's time.
I'll give him credit for one thing, John. One thing. And he actually did it today.
Oh, what'd he do?
He signed a Senate bill, I think it was 215 today, making Ohio a constitutional carry state.
Did he really?
I'll give him credit for that, because that thing's been bouncing back and forth and tug of war for, 10, 12 years. And he finally signed that into law today.
Well, good for him.
Yeah.
And it was a conference for someone I knew many years ago before she even started this organization called Relationships Under Construction. And they had their banquet Friday night, and there was a guy there. I can't remember the name. It's CCV, something Christian Values. It's a sort of a lobbying think tank group. David Mahan was there and spoke, and he was talking about it. I'm sitting there my wife says, "You're not listening." I said, "I'm taking notes on my phone so I can share this on Sunday on my update." And I shared some of it yesterday with the stuff they're bringing into our kids. Okay, so this is a real life thing. Like there's these groups for sex education. Mm-hmm. So down in Florida, the governor is supporting a bill, and they've passed a bill, and it's pejoratively called the Don't Say Gay bill. That's not what it is. It's to stop this radical sex education to kindergarten to third grade kids.
Yeah.
And so he talked about there's a National Sex Education Advisory Board. So I started drilling down through these things. There's a group called SIECUS that has national SIE, something sex and education, CUS. And I think it's Sex in Education Curriculum, United States or something, whatever. But and then you start drilling down into the advisory things, and it's Human Rights Campaign. It's all the gay rights groups. It's the transgender groups and all of this stuff. And then I came down to this one that was called the EFFING Foundation.
Oh my.
And so you look at their advisory board, and it's like, I'm a sex goddess and I'm a sexutainer. And I mean, it was so vile. I can't even share it with people that these are the people that are coming in to get your kids. And so here's the deal. I mean, so is this where the church, and I know that passing the right laws doesn't save anybody, but it protects them.
That's right.
You know, and listen, how many dead people ever accept the gospel? Right? I mean, we're at that situation.
Yeah.
And so you got to protect your kids.
That's right.
You know, get them to where they're saved and stuff. You have a responsibility to do that. And so maybe that's where the church can be a help to people that are homeschooling their kids and that type of thing. Because that's a ministry thing that people can do. So
absolutely.
I don't have all the answers, and I will just tell you is the world is incredibly complex. But I do think that this message that we have is the only truth, and we need to stand against people who chop away at it. We were talking about one famous pastor that I played a clip of him yesterday. Somebody said, well, if you just played 30 seconds more, everything would be okay. And I'm like, okay, so I'll go play the one where he talked about the gay couple in his church that they couldn't serve. He did a sermon on him. It was like 8 years ago. And maybe it was 10 years ago. He did a sermon on him. And it was like, well, the gay male couple couldn't serve in the church because they weren't married yet. Therefore, they were living in adultery. So until they got married, then they could serve.
Oh my goodness!
They've got the clips Between Grace and Truth. You go look it up. It's Andy Stanley. He brings in the Enneagram. He brings in this mysticism stuff. The Enneagram is rank New Age stuff, and he's exposing pastors at his, I can't remember what he calls his conferences, but you know there'll be 20,000 church leaders and people at his conferences, and he's giving this stuff out.
It's insane, John, is what it is.
And then people are crawling up my backside like, well, you know, I think you're a little bit too hard on him. And I'm like, I don't think I'm hard enough.
No, that's what I was going to say, John. You're not hard enough. Listen, I know you're going to find this very hard to believe, but we're out of time already.
Wow. Well,
yeah. Can we do it again
soon? Whenever you want to do it.
Okay, let's close the gap on this, because once every 6, 8, 9 months, that's not cutting it. And folks were really active in the chat. They appreciated your comments, your thoughts, and what you had to share. So, friends, that's all we've got today. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. We'll talk off air after we end this broadcast, and we'll get something in the books. But
thank you, Mike. God bless.
Thank you, John. Hey, God bless you guys. Thanks for joining me today. Please share this show with your friends. We love you all. And remember, renewing our minds is not an option. Go serve your King.